On the Umpqua-Rogue Divide, there is an area known as the Huckleberry Special Interest Area, and it is a culturally significant area for our tribe. And the fires of 2017 and 2018 burned through that special interest area and affected some of the areas where tribal members go and gather. And through a partnership with the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest and the Umpqua National Forest, they came to us and said, hey, we'd really like to partner with you to go up and replant that burned area. We know it's significant for you all. We were hoping you'd like to join us on this. Because they had the conversation with us early, we were able to be a project partner on that. We were able to be a part of the grant that they applied for to get the funding to do it. And as a result, we were able to replant over 11,000 huckleberry plants on the Rogue Umpqua Divide.
At its heart, tribal consultation honors the sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. Tribal sovereignty is the inherent authority of tribal nations to govern themselves and make decisions about issues that impact their lands and communities. Sovereignty also means tribal nations have an innate right to preserve their cultures, traditions, and ways of life in harmony with the land.
For sovereignty in our tribal nation, we are just that. We're nations within nations. We're small nations that have rights that were not given to us, not returned, but were inalienable rights that came from the ancestors, from Creator, from being on these lands for thousands of years and stewarding these places. We were able to be recognized by the federal government as one of the 9 federally recognized tribes due to our unique culture surviving and thriving.
And so we've grown by exercising our sovereignty. We can tax, we can make laws, we have our own tribal court. And so those are near and dear to us.
Tribal sovereignty, very important for Indigenous people of North America or wherever you're from. Very important to be able to express yourself, to be able to speak your language, to carry on with your traditions and your culture, to worship as you were meant to, as Creator had imparted that to the people. Important to serve one another and to take care of one another. That's, I believe, the importance.
Tribal consultation, sometimes called government to government, is a process that recognizes the sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. This process takes place by engaging the tribes in meaningful dialogue before making decisions that may affect their interests, resources, or rights. More than coordination, consultation requires early and frequent outreach with tribal leaders. Consultation requires humility and respect for sovereign tribal nations. It involves researching and learning about tribes and building ongoing relationships with tribal leaders. It also requires this process to begin before a plan has been developed. Meaningful consultation entails striving for the co-designing of plans with tribes and honoring tribal expertise and knowledge of the land. In 2023, I added the role of Tribal Affairs Director to my office, an historic moment for the state's efforts to foster meaningful collaboration with the state's tribal nations.
Big C consultation means government consultation, and that's where the top state officials will meet directly with our tribal council. And so that's for government relationships. That's when you're meeting with Big C consultation, you're meeting with our tribal council. You're not meeting with me or meeting with staff. That's the small C consultations.
And so for us, it's making sure it's not just a checkbox, it's a meaningful consultation. And it's not to looking as how the tribes might slow us down, but how the tribes might help us, because we have very much to offer in that consultation.
Consultation is really a formal discussion. That is decision makers meeting with the Tribal Council that is really coming to the table in the very beginning too, in talking about ideas. But you can't make decisions, formal decisions, without the decision makers talking to the decision makers of Oregon's tribal nations. Don't put a policy in front of me that's already written.
In 2001, the Oregon State Legislature established a framework for communication between state agencies and the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. This made Oregon one of the first states in the nation to require state agencies to make a reasonable effort to cooperate with tribes. Tribal sovereignty is also protected by a series of federal laws and treaties recognizing tribes' rights to live and thrive on their established lands. It is important to note that through the Supremacy Clause in the United States Constitution, these laws and treaties take precedence over state and local decisions. This means that in Oregon, honoring tribal sovereignty through government-to-government consultation is a legal obligation under both federal and state law.
Our ancestors, including my 3 times great-grandfather, signed a treaty that guaranteed us the right to live well on the reservation lands that we retained in exchange for much of Oregon and a large chunk of Northern California. So tribal consultation means, first of all, recognizing that the Klamath tribes are a sovereign nation, that we predate the United States, that we have signed a treaty with the United States, and so government-to-government consultation is the proper way to interact with us about important things.
But in Oregon, we're lucky that those relationships are fostered by the Legislative Commission on Indian Services, which was established under Oregon statute, and by successive governors who have would listen to us.
The 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon are unique entities with their own perspectives, cultures, and ways of life. If an initiative or proposal may impact multiple tribes, all affected tribes must be consulted equally. One tribe cannot speak on behalf of another. Although we recognize and honor the differences between the tribes, it's important to remember that the legal requirement for engaging tribes in consultation are the same. If an action your agency is considering may impact one or more of the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon, you must first reach out to the appropriate leaders of all affected tribes. These leaders must be in a position of authority to engage in consultation. It's important to be patient and work with the tribe's timeline. Tribal government leaders are often unpaid elected officials with competing professions and responsibilities. It's important to schedule a meeting with tribal leaders and plan future meetings as necessary. Consultation will require an ongoing conversation with involved tribes in every step of the process.
Consultation is an opportunity also for state agency representatives to learn more about the tribes. And so really starting from the ground, they need to learn about us and not just depend on us to tell them who we are and what's important to us. And so really doing their homework and maybe reading some books that we have published would be helpful, learning about our history, our culture, and not being afraid to come here to the Umatilla Indian Reservation and learn about us and really get to know us is important.
And what works and is right for Burns Paiute tribe in Eastern Oregon may not work for the other tribes. And it's important for the state agencies to understand that, because a lot of times they try to give us a template agreement, give us a template response, and tribal sovereignty helps us mitigate that through defining who we are and what best works for the Burns Paiute tribe.
Finally, consultation recognizes that tribes steward their land for the benefit of everyone, not just tribal members. Members of tribal nations face the same challenges the state of Oregon tackles every day: access to safe and stable housing, safe, responsive schools for our youth, and equitable access to health care and behavioral health needs. The work Oregon state agencies do across the enterprise impacts tribal nations. As traditional ecological knowledge bearers, tribal communities understand the long history of their land's ecosystem.
This insight allows tribes to implement innovative and sustainable approaches to land management and conservation. Consultation is an opportunity to leverage tribes' unique knowledge of their lands so that we can all enjoy the terrain of our beautiful state.
We've shown that our interests as a tribe are the same interests that the state of Oregon has. It's just that we are compelled to protect our future and our tribal members and to raise happy, healthy individuals.
Everybody needs our environment and our land and our water healthy. We all need this. This is just one more opportunity for my sons to sit at the table and say, I know this about my river, I know what's happening, and I want to tell you about this thing. And people are going to listen. That's one of the great examples of meaningful consultation.
The tribe looks 7 generations ahead for what we do with everything, especially our land management. And most of the work that we do in natural resources, I won't get to see the results of that within my lifetime. But maybe my children, my grandchildren, my grandchildren's grandchildren will get to see those benefits. So that's how we plan.
Tribal consultation is an opportunity to build relationships, learn from traditional knowledge keepers, and create meaningful policies and initiatives that enhance life for both tribal and non-tribal communities alike. If you or your office are required to enter into consultation, there are resources to support you. This video series offers a look at the significance of consultation from the perspective of the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon themselves.
We've seen a number of activities that we work cooperatively with state agencies to restore resources and accomplish the goals for both the agencies and the C2IR, such as working with Bonneville Power Administration, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on our salmon restoration efforts in the Umatilla River and in other basins. The accomplishment of restoration of salmon to the Umatilla River after 70 years of extirpation is a great example of how we can work with our federal and state partners to get these resources protected. But if the agencies, the state and federal agencies, weren't willing to consult with the tribes or contact us and work directly with us, successful projects like that wouldn't be possible.
A benefit from the consultations through Oregon Department of Education is that any tribal member of the 9 tribes of Oregon can attend a college in Oregon with a tuition scholarship. What that does for tribal members is we're at a time where we know and understand, not only do we have to understand our traditional values and our identity of who we are, but we also need to learn how to consult with agencies and the English language that they rule under.
These sovereign tribal nations are our neighbors, partners, and friends. They have much to teach us about stewarding this land we now call Oregon. I invite you to approach this legal requirement for tribal consultation with an open heart and a humble spirit. Though the journey ahead may seem daunting, it is up to all of us to build the bonds of trust between our state and tribal governments.
So whatever is being recorded here, I hope that my younger people are listening. This is our position. It doesn't matter what tribe you're talking to, but this is our position as to who we are, have been, and will continue to be. And we'll carry on our teachings long after we're gone.
So tribal sovereignty, to me, gives each of the tribes the ability to understand their lands, their laws, their people, and to give them the flexibility to work with state agencies to help them understand who we are So when we get into a relationship, whether that's an agreement or whatnot, a funding grant, we can say for Burns Paiute, this is what matters to us. This is the impacts it has for Burns Paiute. And each tribe has their own issues, their own priorities, their own landscapes. And so sovereignty for me gives us the ability to really stand up for Burns Paiute tribe. With agencies, we aren't all seen as the same because that is the farthest from the truth. We are not the same. And what works and is right for Burns Paiute tribe in Eastern Oregon may not work for the other tribes. And it's important for the state agencies to understand that because a lot of times they try to give us a template agreement, give us a template response. And tribal sovereignty helps us mitigate that through defining who we are. You know, Burns Paiute tribe, we've only been federally recognized for a little over 51 years. And in that 50 years, we're trying to identify, to start rebuilding our nation. And a lot of, I would say over the past decade, we have newer, younger leadership that are being able to work with the state and state agencies in different ways that hadn't been done before. So with the new generation coming up, it's essential that tribal sovereignty also be flexible and change with time. So one of the differences about Burns Paiute tribe that state agencies may not recognize is some tribes do have treaties and some do not, and some tribes were terminated. Burns Paiute, we do not have a treaty. There was a treaty offered to us to have Malahir Reservation that was 1.9 million acres, which was never ratified. So with that, Burns Paiute was homeless for many, many years. There are benefits to having a treaty, having protected lands where your people could thrive and live and carry on their cultural values within the reservation lands. And we were not given that opportunity, so we struggled living in this area, homeless, landless, until the early 1920s. We have a 7-member council, and none of the 7 members are full-time. So we don't have the funding to be able to have full-time tribal council members like some of the other tribes. So each council member has a full-time job, 40-hour-a-week job, and we do the tribal council work in addition to our daytime job. One of the successful consultations we had was with ODF&W in about 2017, 2018, in which we were able to come to an agreement and get tags for our tribal members. And that was a lot of work with ODF&W, Burns Paiute Natural Resources, and the Tribal Council. The benefits of that still exist to today. This week, we did our draws for our hunters to determine who got what tags, and that's always an exciting moment because before this MOU, this agreement, this consultation with ODF&W, we could only hunt within the Burns Paiute tribe, and the Burns Paiute tribe trust lands is 700 acres. And so there's a few scraggly deers that come on here, which you probably would not even think about eating because we're so close to the city of Burns. But what that has done is created motivation for those who knew how to hunt and be able to express that and teach the younger people who never learned that way, but now have the opportunity to go to our forest and actually hunt. A benefit from the consultations through Oregon Department of Education is that any tribal member of the 9 tribes of Oregon can attend a college in Oregon with a tuition scholarship. What that does for tribal members is we're at a time where we know and understand, not only do we have to understand our traditional values and our identity of who we are, but we also need to learn how to consult with agencies and the English language that they rule under. And so having access to education is pivotal at this time. You know, state has worked hard to create a lot of positions of tribal liaisons to better understand how to work with the tribes and take that back to their organizations. Even though the state has gone above and beyond to try to create these positions to better support the tribes, it also creates a burden for tribes because we have limited capacity, and these tribal liaisons don't have the right education to be able to work effectively, which is always the ultimate goal. There's definitely opportunity for education to benefit both the tribes, philanthropy, state agencies, because we all are here for the long term. You know, we are here for the greater of the good, and communication is key, and not making assumptions on how one tribe, one state, one town operates. We're all very different. We have very different identities. We have very different capacity levels, funding levels. You know, please just work with us and try to understand us. You know, the baseline of all great outcomes is relationship building, and we expect to build relationships with you all individually without no assumptions, and that will create a longevity that we all hope for our tribal communities, the state of Oregon, state agencies, because that's what we want in our heart, is to better work together to create a future in which we all thrive.
Consultation is a two-way street. It's not us meeting with somebody and them not answering any of our questions or any of our letters. You got to remember, we still have trauma from all the state issues in the beginning and everything, forced march, relocation, termination, reinstated. That all has effect on all of us. And so we're leery when working with other folks that don't listen to what we have to say. That's the main thing. We have 7 board members, and that's 7 people who have to be at the table. And when we're discussing stuff, it would be nice if they would listen and give us feedback. If you can't answer any of those questions, let us know that you can't answer those questions. If you're silent, it feels like we're not being heard. It feels like we're not being recognized. And we've had too much of that already in our past.
Tribal consultation, for me, I think of it in my practice and my experience in 2 ways. There's the lowercase c for consultation is really a way for an agency, an entity, organization of any sort that wants to engage with the tribe and talk, and those people that are present are whoever is most fitting for that lowercase consultation, just getting to know one another and where our needs are, what our wants are, what our direction, our vision, mission may be. Consultation with a capital C is leader to leader. So really, consultation, for example, at the state level, is tribal council to the governor. That's consultation with a capital C, and my understanding of how the process works best is when you have those decision makers, the leaders, at the table. So if there's an agency maybe within the United States that, a national agency of some sort, whoever is the decision maker, meeting with our decision makers, that's consultation. And that relationship is at the highest level there. And so a lot of thought and intention goes into that process for the best outcome.
Consultation is strictly between leadership. Staff employees, staff level employees can be brought in to those consultations to support the conversation. However, if you have a staff level meeting, that's what it is. It's a staff level meeting. It's not a consultation. Both parties have to come to the table with someone there who has the authority to make decisions. Staff level is important, and not to downplay those types of meetings, but when you bring For instance, you come to a tribal council meeting, and somebody comes and gives a presentation. That's not consultation, that's a presentation, delivering information, which has its own value, but it's not consultation.
Well, there's tribal consultation, and then there's all of the work that kind of gets you to that point. It's a process, it takes a lot of time sometimes, and it took years to get our language to be recognized by the state and also funded by the state. And with the Oregon Department of Education language grant that came out a couple years ago, it's what established our language program at the tribe. And so we're on year 4 of wrapping up our language classes, and we couldn't have done it without all of that work, that probably over a decade of work to kind of get us to that point.
Good consultation means both parties come to the table with recognition of the sovereignty of each, and they should have a forthright conversation on the specific topics. They should be ready to discuss those topics and be able and willing to come together and to reach that consensus. Some of the consultations I've been involved with over the years, both as tribal council and as tribal government staff, have involved parties who are willing to talk and have those conversations that show that they're willing to recognize what's important to each party.
For sovereignty in our tribal nation, we are just that. We're nations within nations. We're small nations that have rights that were not given to us, not returned, but were inalienable rights that came from the ancestors, from Creator, from being on these lands for thousands of years and stewarding these places. But legally, we are one of the federally recognized tribes. We were able to be recognized by the federal government as one of the 9 federally recognized tribes due to our unique culture surviving and thriving. You know, when we're talking about reasons for our sovereignty or our stewardship goals within our own lands, a big reason is that our treaty was never ratified, and in order for tribes to cede lands to the United States government, there has to be a ratified treaty. And because of that treaty never being ratified, for us, we still see ourselves as stewards of these lands, whether we technically own them or not. And we do that not by ourselves, but we do that by working with our partners. So whether that be watersheds, whether that be nonprofits, whether that be land trusts, whether that be state agencies, fed agencies, you know, that's what we do because we care so innately about our small land base or our watersheds. And if everybody cares that much about their watersheds or land base, then we wouldn't have any issues.
We just have to keep plugging away and trying to get people to see what we're talking about and how we're talking about it. Lamprey, for instance. Everybody puts in fish ladders for salmon, but they forget about the lamprey. The lamprey can't come up the same salmon ladder. So we have to put up lamprey chutes so they can actually get in. You know, culverts stop the lamprey from getting out. All you need is a ramp, they can get in. We've watched this happen over and over and over, and I just wish everybody else out there would pay attention to what the tribes are saying. If our ecosystem's out of balance, let's fix it. Let's fix what's out of balance.
Because we are a nation within a nation and our lands were never ceded, we still feel like we're inherent stewards, which we are. And because a lot of our lands are in public ownership, so national forests, BLM, state, and county, and also private, we have to work with a myriad of landowners. And we also work with watershed councils, nonprofits, because we do feel like it's our responsibility to still steward those lands, and not just, you know, for our people, but for all people. because in our culture, we share, like the way we measure our wealth is we share not only our physical possessions, but we share food, we share dances, we share song. Part of the Natural Resources and Culture Department is working with all those moving parts, and tribal sovereignty goes hand in hand with that. And so without our tribal sovereignty, we wouldn't be able to do any of that prior to restoration. It's important to know where we've been, to know where we're going, and it's important to encompass multiple ways of knowing because we're in unprecedented times, and it's going to take everyone to come together and to ensure that the sources that we currently have will be here in perpetuity for our future generations. We've been sharing this place for a very long time, and we're willing to, but we also expect the people that also share this place to, share not only in meals, but actually stewarding the place in a good way and with a good heart going forward. That's going to be beneficial for the next generations.
To be the descendants of the people of this land that have been here since time immemorial, and to be able to be in this place as a sovereign nation and to be making decisions for our tribal members still today is incredible. When there is respect, when there is conversations and coordination and communication, that our work is much easier. So we talk about this word consultation a lot. What does that mean? And it's different for every tribe. I will recognize that now. I do not speak for any other tribe but my own. And it is really just about the fact that it is recognized if you're going to be doing work in our homelands, that you reach out. If the tribes don't have a say in those conversations, things are missed. And I don't believe, again, that that is intentional, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you are willing and just understanding that it might take a little bit longer, it might cost a little more, but the end result of whatever project that is going to be much better. But you can't make decisions, formal decisions, without the decision makers talking to the decision makers of Oregon's tribal nations. Don't put a policy in front of me that's already written. Consultation is really a formal discussion. That is decision makers meeting with the tribal council. That is really coming to the table in the very beginning too, in talking about ideas. We recently met for consultation with BOEM on the wind energy projects that are being planned out off of our coast. This is something new for us, for green energy projects, and the Coquille Indian Tribe is in support of any efforts environmentally to do things in a better way. And we want to be at the table to have those conversations. You can't expect to have time with the governor of the state of Oregon within 2 weeks. Please remember, tribal leaders are very busy, and we get a lot of Dear Tribal Leader letters. If you're not hearing back from us, please keep reaching out, because the tribes are great partners.
And you can wrap as many times as you want to get it tighter.
One of the things that I've seen grow and expand through a lot of our work is the understanding and acceptance and appreciation for tribal best practices, and letting tribes kind of lead the way on how funds are spent to support the youth in their communities. And one of those funding sources allowed us to build and practice the canoe culture with the youth. The youth have their own canoe. A lot of the experiences with federal agencies and understanding just Native American cultures and the differences between the tribes across, the United States. But when you're talking about just one state like Oregon and the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon, each tribe is different in the way that they govern and manage, and there might be a lot of similarities, but there are differences. And I think that that's something that's very unique to us, that we get to embrace that, instill that, like, that understanding and that connection for our youth and future leaders.
Practice the day before. It's either the day before or like right before.
So the canoe was one of the first real collaborative efforts in developing the grant, and I don't know if it would be elevated to the level of tribal consultation as far as like government to government, but it was the first time that we really got to sit down with that state agency and discuss what was important and how we could still reach these prevention measures that the state needed in the way that the tribe needed to do it, and how we needed to do it for our youth and our community, and really focusing on that positive interaction and the healing part of getting the kids involved in something like the canoe and culturally grounded and a piece of their identity that counteracts the negative.
And he says, she shoot.
That means good.
Yeah, I'm good. She shoot. Can y'all say she shoot?
We can lead by great examples of how resilient Native American people can be and are. So I think that, you know, when we are working on that government to government level and that state agency level, if we're part of those conversations, if we're part of that planning, if it's really meaningful consultation from the beginning, that amazing work can be done that benefits all.
I thought you wanted to make one of those signs, Christmas signs, welcome sign, or whatever they're making this year.
Ooh, yeah. So December.
I would say the most tribal consultation that I have been lucky to be a part of is with ODE. The government to government education cluster is a really, although it's not perfect, it has come a really long way, and it has a lot of amazing components that invite tribes to the table. So tribal consultation is important, especially if it has to do with our people and our land, or anything about our people, because we know best. Of course, you would want people sitting at the table that know the best of what you're talking about and what you're trying to come up with. And I think, well, I know tribes need consulted at the beginning, not the middle and not the end. Definitely not the end. And I think when tribes are consulted by other governments, the outcome is so much better.
I'm really proud of how Oregon and the tribes have worked together. I think they are an example of what is possible in the United States when we talk about tribal and state relationships. There were a lot of opportunities that were created by state leaders and partners across the state agencies. We talked about creating a Alaska Native American Indian State Plan. We had great partners with the Oregon Department of Education. We had a great leader in our tribal clusters, and we started drilling down on what does it mean to create an environment where students feel safe enough to talk about who they are. A lot of work has been done. Very proud of our work with Oregon Department of Education and the leadership that has come out of that agency to help advance these initiatives, the strategic plan, and not only identifying the strategic plan action items, but investing in those. It's about relationships. It's not about just sending an email or a calendar. It is about picking up the phone and having the conversation. Tribes get inundated with requests, consultation requests, calendar invites, and then really just picking up the phone and having that conversation oftentimes is the fastest track to get to the tribe around consultation. There are a lot of examples of tribes working with state agencies on great with great outcomes around things that we've achieved through meaningful consultation. One of the most important for the Cookville Tribe is a recent consultation with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the creation of a co-management agreement. They have knowledge. They know the land. They know the resources. They know the stories. They carry those things. This ODF&W co-management agreement says not only can our tribal youth, our tribal members come sit at the table and listen, but we get to participate and drive the directives for the work that needs to happen to make our environment healthy. Everybody needs our environment and our land and our water healthy. We all need this. This is just one more opportunity for my sons to sit at the table and say, I know this about my river, I know what's happening, and I want to tell you about this thing. And people are going to listen. That's one of the great examples of meaningful consultation.
The tribe sees itself as a steward of our lands. And in order to be stewards of our land, we need to be able to manage it appropriately. Bedu, Kelly Coates Kuritka, Nahankodana Ete. Friends, Kelly Coates is my name, and I am of the Cow Creek people. And I am the Director of Natural Resources for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. We're a sovereign nation. We are our own government. And oftentimes we can be put into a stakeholder category, or we'll be told the public process for review of this project will be this time period. We are not a part of the public. We are not a stakeholder. We are a sovereign government. And so as such, we need to be consulted with as you would with any other sovereign government before a project happens, which to us should be early and often, and it should be before a project starts, so we can provide feedback on how we think that project may impact our lands and our resources. When we received lands in the 2018 Western Oregon Tribal Fairness Act, that restored a portion of our reservation lands, a little over 17,500 acres. But those lands are non-contiguous, which means it's a checkerboard ownership. We still have members of the public, our community members, that go out onto tribal lands. For example, there's a popular fishing spot in the South Umpqua called Red Top Pond. That is now on tribal lands, former BLM ONC lands, but they are part of our reservation lands now, and members of the public are still welcome to go up and go fishing. So this also affects the way that we manage the lands, understanding that not only are we managing for our tribal members, we're managing our lands for our entire community. And really sometimes the state of Oregon, because these lands are open to folks that can come from all over the state to visit. And so we really try to reach out and have a partnership approach to our lands management, especially in those areas where it's checkerboard and we're right there with our neighbors, and we want to be good neighbors and good partners.
The Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians are unique from the other tribes in Oregon in many ways. It's often been said if you spoke to one tribe, you've spoke to one tribe. In the case of Cow Creek, we have a unique history because we were one of the first two tribes in the Pacific Northwest to sign a treaty with the United States government in 1853. And unfortunately, in 1855, when the wars broke out in the Rogue Valley, it brought a lot of unrest to the area. Many of our tribal members remained in the area and hid, and eventually took their existence underground. It wasn't until the early 1900s, the 1910s and the 20s, that our ancestors were successful in getting bills introduced into Congress. 5 times there were bills introduced to restore our tribe. And not having a tax base tribes depend on their economic development and their natural resources. We have had to rely on our revenues from our gaming to fund our governmental operations, and through those funds we're able to offer programs that are education, housing, social services, things that enrich people's lives. As CEO of the Cow Creek Tribe, I have many opportunities to work closely with state agencies, and we work very closely on issues that not only are related to the tribe, but issues that the state engages in that can affect tribes in general. A lot of times we get mired down in the wording of what consultation is and what consultation means to each tribe. I look at it in a very simplistic manner. Consultation is exactly what the word is defined as. And for Cow Creek, that consultation means communication. Communication is key to consultation, and that is something that I hope can be educated not only into tribal staff, but into state agencies as well, because so often we're overlooked when it comes to decisions that are made by the state. And we don't want to be roadblocks. We want to move forward as well. But being consulted and having that open line of communication is something that is essential.
I really hope that people understand that tribes are not trying to oppose them, they're trying to work with them. And that the sovereignty that they have worked so hard for. And it's in our, we have treaties with the United States government that we want to have fulfilled. And our people have worked very hard to become self-sufficient and to be recognized as a government. And that is important to all of us. And just as it's important to every state to be recognized as a state, we are a tribal government just like the state is the state of Oregon. And we want people to recognize that and to treat us with the same respect as the state government is treated, and understand that we want to work with them for the betterment of the state and for the tribal citizens and our community. So our goal is to protect and to promote, preserve our tribal sovereignty to benefit the citizens of our tribe, and to continue to educate, employ, and give them the ability to provide for themselves. We're the second largest employer in Douglas County. Education is very important to us, K through 12. Our main goal is to create learners. We need consultation before the state starts a project and have them come to us before the beginning of anything that's going to affect the tribes in any way.
On the Umpqua-Rogue Divide, there is an area known as the Huckleberry Special Interest Area, and it is a culturally significant area for our tribe. And the fires of 2017 and 2018 burned through that special interest area and affected some of the areas where tribal members go and gather. And through a partnership with the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest and the Umpqua National Forest, they came to us and said, hey, right before the fires broke out, we went out and we collected seeds from huckleberry plants from that area. We'd really like to partner with you to go up and replant that burned area. We know it's significant for you all. We were hoping you'd like to join us on this. Because they had the conversation with us early and before the project started, we were able to be a project partner on that. We were able to be a part of the grant that they applied for to get the funding to do it. We were able to bring in not only match dollars for the project, but also staff capacity and time to work on it. And as a result, we were able to replant over 11,000 huckleberry plants on the Rogue Umpqua Divide. And the project is especially meaningful for me as a tribal member. This is an area that is incredibly significant for me and for my family. It's somewhere we go at least once a year. I take my kids there. I was able to take my daughter, who is also a tribal member, up to help do the replanting and explain to her what happened, that the fires came through, but this is our chance to give back to the land. The tribe looks 7 generations ahead for what we do with everything, especially our land management. And most of the work that we do in natural resources, I won't get to see the results of that within my lifetime. But maybe my children, my grandchildren, my grandchildren's grandchildren will get to see those benefits. So that's how we plan.
Tribal sovereignty is important because it's the acknowledgement that the federal government's always recognized us as separate people, separate governments, all the tribes, and the treaties that we signed, they speak to that as well. We're in the Declaration of Independence and we're in the Constitution, and so sovereignty is that acknowledgement that we've always been independent people, we've always managed our lands for millennia, so I think that's what sovereignty is just that acknowledgement. We've been doing this and we're going to continue to do this.
Tribal sovereignty, very important for indigenous people of North America or wherever you're from. Very important to be able to express yourself, to be able to speak your language, to carry on with your traditions and your culture, to worship as you were meant to, as Creator had imparted that to the people. Important to serve one another and to take care of one another. That's, I believe, the importance. It's really the ability to make choices, to make sure that you listen to what the people's needs are and try your hardest to try to get there and to do as they please. So it's never done. It's always there, and things change. And as people get different ideas, that also motivates change. So for me, tribal sovereignty was embedded in my life, in my heart, in my mind, from my grandmother, who was born 1900. But sovereignty is living your life in the way that you knew it to be. And that was really off of the land, live off the land, take care of the land. So that's really, sovereignty is about being able to live safe, being able to have a place where you do stay. It's about managing your own physical body, so healthcare is very important. If you're taken from the land and banished from the land, you don't have access to your medicines and the things that keep you healthy. Of course, when you think about sovereignty, you think about the ability to govern yourself, to set up the system that you think is important. And that's to police yourself as well. So sovereignty is really being able to move, breathe, live, and do what you want, and to manage your affairs in a peaceful way.
Tribal consultation is a piece of that sovereignty, right? So if you have a government-to-government relationship, it doesn't work unless there's some consultation behind it. It's kind of putting action to those words themselves. So it is very much an active role. It isn't just something that you kind of check the box as something done. It's listening as well. Tribal consultation means a lot to me as a leader because that's how we govern each other. We govern our own people by the decisions that we're going to make based on the needs of our tribe, and then kind of intermixing that with either the state or local governments or the federal government It's just working together collaboratively to get to the spot that not just our tribal people need, but in some cases it's what other localities, other federal people, the local communities is what they need as well. So it's that piece. It's a consultation to improve all of our outcomes, but specifically for our own tribal people's needs, which each tribe is different on that. It's reaching out and saying, we know these are your ceded lands, and we know that you still have a lot of role to play in there, and we feel that connection still. So it's our responsibility that we still carry today in all our ceded lands. And so for us, it's making sure it's not just a checkbox, it's a meaningful consultation, and it's not to looking as how the tribes might slow us down, but how the tribes might help us, because we have very much to offer in that consultation.
So consultation is really, to me, before you start messing with the land and the air, the environment, you just ask the tribe. We're thinking about this. What do you think? Do you think, do you have any thoughts that it might affect you adversely? Or would it enhance anything you have? Is there anything going on here that might harm you? And eventually, can we get your support? In its purest form, it's respect. It's an honorable thing to do, to be able to look at each other eye to eye and to sit there and to know there's no hidden agenda, that this is really an open forum.
So I think it's an active process when it's not just sending a letter, right? It's participating, follow-up. Sure, send a letter, but some follow-up with that. I think a good example of that, again, is Governor Brown had a cultural items task force that she assembled. And that is requiring the state agencies to do an inventory of all the items that might be cultural that they have in their possession. So it's a way of people not judging for themselves, just thinking outside the box a little. And while this picture itself might not seem cultural, but the landscape and what's hidden in there that we haven't seen for years very much is so. For kids to have better opportunities, I think that's an issue of sovereignty, where the values that we place, we get to actually put them in our programs themselves. And I think that's a huge exercise of sovereignty is, while it might not be as important to, say, the federal government or the general population, we get to pick and choose for ourselves what is important, whether we incorporate in our landscape our traditional foods, things like that. How we reflect our sovereignty is in those choices, and I think they're important.
There's a relationship between all living things in water. And that relationship is respectful to one another. You don't see the fish throwing the water out and trying to make a dam of it. It flows in harmony together.
So I think tribal consultation for our local communities or for the tribe both, and how we share some benefits from that. One that comes to mind is salmon and our efforts to help out the salmon people. They have always been there for us. And I think our efforts and our consultation is going to lead to not just our benefits for the tribe and the salmon people, but for all the communities that salmon's become a very important part of the Northwest. Oh, I think it is very important that we recognize that each tribe has different focus areas and different needs. I think it's hugely important that while the consultation is important, we reach out to those that are in their ceded lands, it's also important to recognize those differences and to be accepting of those differences and allow the space for them. I think the most important thing to remember with consultation is that each tribe is different. You have to know that there are going to be differences, And it isn't necessarily you have to pick and choose who's right or wrong. You just have to be aware that there are differences and not to assume that what you've heard from one tribe is going to be true for every tribe. So I think you just approach it like you do with any individual. Give them their space, learn their personality, learn their wants and needs and desires. And I think that's the same for tribal groups.
Lots of folks think that we are an American minority group, which we're not. Our ancestors, including my 3 times great-grandfather, signed a treaty that guaranteed us the right to live well on the reservation lands that we retained in exchange for much of Oregon and a large chunk of Northern California. So tribal consultation means, first of all, recognizing that the Klamath tribes are a sovereign nation, that we predate the United States, that we have signed a treaty with the United States, and so government-to-government consultation is the proper way to interact with us about important things. But there have been times when, for example, there was legislation that required consultation with the tribes, and you had political organizations that would come in and really look to just check a box. And they would come in with a plan that was fully developed and say, okay, this is consultation, and we have to say, no, it's not. You know, we need to really sit down and hammer out the details of this plan that you've already created and are now presenting to us. We have a unique form of government that's different from many other forms of government. Our more recent ancestors resisted the Indian Reorganization Act. So our general council is, which is all of our membership, is the very top political entity in our political system. And they can override anything that the tribal council does.
They're our power.
So tribal consultation to me, I think, is really important just because this is our homeland. We've lived here since time immemorial, is what we're always told growing up. Our ancestors have been here for generations before us and have been caretakers of this land for beyond memory. And so I think consultation is really important when coming in and doing anything on our land, because we are going to be the experts at how to care for our land. We're going to have the knowledge that our families have passed down to us on how things have been in the land, how they can be. So I feel like it's really important that consultation takes place with tribes, but not just consultation. It needs to be meaningful consultation, which to me means that people are really listening to what tribes have to say, respecting that we have knowledge that maybe Western science and Western education might not provide for them. And we can work together to try to do what needs to be done on our land to restore it back to the way it used to be, to a working watershed, to bring our chwam and our koptu back to our fisheries. Because here, to us, it's not just land, it's what has provided for our ancestors that allow us to be here. So it's much more important than just some water or some trees or fish. To me, I consider the fish, those are like my relatives. They've sustained my family for generations to allow me to be here, so.
So as the restoration project manager, I find consultation a large part of my daily actions, whether it's me consulting with other agencies or other agencies consulting with myself. You know, I'm constantly given phone calls to other agencies and NGOs asking for their input and like what sorts of projects they're working on. And then vice versa, you know, it's nice to have these agencies come to us and kind of let us know what it is that they're working on and what projects they have planned. I think tribal input needs to be provided during the planning phase so we can provide our input and our ideas and knowledge can be incorporated because, you know, we have lived here our whole lives. Our ancestors have lived here, so we have seen how the landscape has changed and just the differing environment, what changes have occurred, and we see like what works and what doesn't work. And more recently, we released our restoration policy the Ombudot department has. And so with that, what we are doing is asking agencies and NGOs to coordinate and consult with us during these projects. And that begins in the planning phase. And so we've seen a lot more outreach from differing staff and folks just reaching out to us like, hey, we kind of have this plan. What are your thoughts on it? What input do you have? And so that's been pleasant to see because just growing up, I never really saw much coordination, but everyone's just off doing their own little projects instead of working together. So seeing everyone finally starting to kind of like notice that and working together a lot more has been really nice.
I think tribal consultation is important with other agencies. I think we learn together the more we consult. We learn more about the land, more about our own species. A lot of tribal knowledge is passed down, and we have a lot of land more in-depth land knowledge and resource knowledge. We can tell you how rivers have changed in our lifetime and what our parents and grandparents and things have seen. I think they go hand in hand together with book knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, because together we can share that, and it just makes us smarter. It makes us more able to preserve or fix things that are wrong with our resources or boost our ecological system up for the better. Being a lead fisheries tech, we've reached out to both Fish and Wildlife Services this year and USGS, and we've worked with them in the past, but I think the relationship is getting stronger, and it's because we're inviting each other to help a lot with our little projects. Like we're doing tagging later today, and because we helped with their tagging a couple months ago, they volunteered to help with our tagging. I think it's a lot, other agencies might be kind of hesitant to work with the tribe. It's kind of standoffish maybe. And I just think it's just not knowing. They're afraid almost to mess up or say something wrong. And I think it's important to know that we're all people too, and we're all passionate about what we do. That's why we're in the business that we are. I think working with just Fish and Wildlife, we've found that we have a lot in common. We're very passionate about the same things, and we build friendships from there. And I think that's important, to be comfortable with the people and agencies that you work with. The more comfortable you are with them, the more able you are and comfortable to ask questions about stuff you really wouldn't know about. I think if you don't have that connection, we won't be able to learn as much. I think it's very important to have tribal consultation with state agencies, just for that, to build our knowledge together.
I just feel like tribal consultation means that we're not last to know, that we're given time to have these meetings, to make informed decisions, and to have like a mutual respect. And that means giving us enough time to go over the information that they have and who they are and where they're from. I really appreciate when we're given time.
I think it's about autonomy, it's about self-responsibility, and it's about the surrounding nation understanding that we have autonomy and self-responsibility, and being respectful enough of our nationhood to allow us to govern ourselves.
Yeah. We've been here a really long time and we're not going anywhere, so.
Yeah.
In the big picture, the historical perspective of consultation, you know, everyone knows the story of the West. People moved onto our lands without any regard for our people, our rights, our traditions. Jalal Khwiti, hello everyone. Bud Lane Wa'am Nashi. My name is Bud Lane, and I'm a member of the Confederate Tribes of Siletz Indians, and I'm a council member. Serves on the Siletz Tribal Council. I have served for 26 years on the council, and for most of those years served as vice chairman. Our people along the Rogue River and in southwestern Oregon fought a really ugly war called the Rogue River Indian Wars in the 1850s, which resulted in a series of 8 treaties, all of which removed people from their lands forcibly to what is now known as a Siletz Reservation in the 1850s. And of course, during a war, there isn't any consultation. The reservation was reduced almost from the time before the ink was dry on our treaties. And with the Termination Act, our remaining lands were liquidated and sold. And, you know, the tribe began to drift. But in those days, there was no discussion about what you were going to do. These things were just implemented. And it joined the body of what is known as just Indian policy. And a lot of it bad, most of it bad. So, you know, our elders, and I was a teenager back then during Restoration time, you know, I always thought it was like a dream that we would actually get a congressional act passed and become federally recognized again. And it happened. They made it happen. Our chairman, Dolores Pigsley, I think there's 3 people left alive from those tribal councils, and we owe them a great deal of gratitude for the work that they did.
Yes, my name is Dolores Pigsley. I'm the tribal chairman for the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. I've served on the council about 42 years. I've served as tribal chairman for the last 36 years. And so it's been a long and interesting period of time for me and for our tribe. Our tribe was terminated in the 50s and restored in the 70s, and I was lucky, I guess, to be on that restoration council back in the day. And since restoration, we started out with 800 members, enrolled members, initially in 1979, I believe, is when the enrollment was approved. And since then, we're up to 5,500 plus members. We've asked to be consulted on issues that affect us. That doesn't always happen, but the state of Oregon has made sure it happens now by law, and that's been working. And so that consultation's been stepped up tremendously because we can do it by Zoom. And so we have had a lot of contact with the state and with the feds on issues that would have been nice back in the day to have those discussions and those contacts. But I think we've shown in our history that we've become good partners with federal and state agencies. work very well with the governor's office and our congressional delegation.
But in Oregon, we're lucky that those relationships are fostered by the Legislative Commission on Indian Services, which was established under Oregon statute, and by successive governors who have would listen to us. And we have had a great relationship with the current governor. So to me, consultation is much more than just someone having a policy or a project or something that they want to do, and they've already laid the plans out and they're coming to you and want you to rubber stamp it for them. Real consultation means you're at the offing, at the beginning of this discussion, and you can influence things, maybe if you're in favor of it in a good way, and if not, let your thoughts be known and your feelings. We always have sometimes differing views on land issues or water issues, hunting and fishing issues, those types of things. But we always have a government-to-government relationship with those tribes to sit down and to talk about things.
We've shown that our interests as a tribe are the same interests that the state of Oregon has. It's just that we are compelled to protect our future and our tribal members, and to raise happy, healthy individuals. And so we've grown by exercising our sovereignty. We can tax, we can make laws, we have our own tribal court. And so those are near and dear to us. And so when we are asked about issues or a law or something that's going to affect the tribe, it could affect us in many, many ways, just like it does ordinary citizens in Oregon or the nation. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk with individuals, with agencies. We've had a great relationship with the governor in the state of Oregon. And Oregon is one of the few states that have a commission on Indian service, legislative commission on Indian services, which I serve on. And so that organization's been extremely helpful in many of the issues that come before Oregon citizens and go through the commission and funnel to the tribes. And so it's been a good opportunity to get information early before laws get established. So it's very helpful to have these consultations.
We look 7 generations down the road. It's not just what's happening in my lifetime. We all have kids and grandkids in our people, and we're just the latest link in that chain of humanity that is moving forward. We educate our young people so they're armed to live in both worlds, in that world of our ancestors and those traditions, but also in the new world in this time. So.
Any rights that are practiced by Native people are not benevolent gifts of a generous, overlording United States government, but have been retained from the beginning of time as a governmental asset that was retained for future generations, which today are you and I. Another stereotype that we encounter on a daily basis is that we are not modern, in that we are being shelved in the minds of many people. They equate our communities to, they're relegated to sitting on a shelf in a mental museum of the collective communities by which we are not allowed to progress to become working, successful citizens next to the John Q. public, that we have a responsibility to remain wearing war paint, riding horses, living in teepees. Why that is, that of all the communities that come from afar and foreign lands that are embraced into the United States, living the American dream, it seems that the Native people are always being left behind, that we are not allowed to progress forward in a positive way.
First of all, it's important to remember that consultation is not just informing us that an agency has made a decision, it's involving us in the decision process early on and from the beginning, giving us the opportunity to participate in that process. We may decide an issue isn't a priority or relevant for some reason, and we may not participate, but we need to be able to make that decision for ourselves first. Second, I think it's important to try to get to know the organization a little bit and understand who is most likely the best to contact. We have a number of relationships with local governments, cities, counties, state agencies, federal agencies, and so the amount of consultation requests we receive is tremendous. You know, if I wanted to consult on a salmon restoration project with Oregon, I'd take time to understand who in the Department of Fish and Wildlife or Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board I needed to reach to start the conversations, and then expect that we would elevate any issues that became policy issues as needed. So people really need to understand that it's going to be a lot more efficient if you invest some time up front to try to understand the organization a little bit, make sure you're contacting the right people, and then foster and maintain those relationships over time. And the consultation will be easier, I think more effective, and more efficient for both parties.
I just gave a presentation, and that was one of the first questions that was asked after our presentation is, as a government agency, how do we coordinate and work with tribes? And my answer is call them up and go to lunch. I mean, that's a good way to just start. You usually have professional overlap, you know, they're planners or you're working in transportation. Something is causing that, some kind of like linkage to have a conversation. So call them up, go to lunch, get to know each other, understand where everybody's coming from, and then work through whatever situation you're going through.
Consultation is very important to us because for my program, particularly the Cultural Resources Protection Program, we protect archaeological sites, we protect sites of cultural and religious significance to the tribes that include our first food gathering areas. So our root fields, our huckleberry fields, our fishing sites, and our hunting areas, and then also areas where we gather medicines and raw materials. And so, you know, today is to honor our children for the work that they're doing. They're now becoming providers of those foods for our community, for their families.
Here you go, 10 feet on the nose. Yeah, no, I get it. Give them something to really work for.
I think about my past ancestors and where they went to, where they traveled to, and what they were there for. They were there for those first food resources, those raw materials to live upon and sustain upon. And so we continue that practice today. And so I'm there to help consult to make sure that my children, my grandchildren, and their grandchildren are able to go back to those places that are important to us to gather those foods. Consultation is an opportunity also for state agency representatives to learn more about the tribes. And so really starting from the ground, they need to learn about us and not just depend on us to tell them who we are and what's important to us. And so really doing their homework and maybe reading some books that we have published would be helpful, learning about our history, our culture, and not being afraid to come here to the Umatilla Indian Reservation and learn about us and really get to know us is important.
Consultation with tribes is a government-to-government basis where the agency meets with the tribe and discusses their proposals. This is more of a, like I said, clearinghouse of information, presenting it to the tribes and then gathering whether there's further interest to conduct those government-to-government meetings. It is important that agencies reach out to tribes to communicate with them about what actions they're going to take, what they're planning on doing, and involving tribes in the decision-making of land use actions and planned activities. We've seen a number of activities that we work cooperatively with state agencies to restore resources and accomplish the goals for both the agencies and the C2IR, such as working with Bonneville Power Administration, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on our salmon restoration efforts in the Umatilla River and in other basins. The accomplishment of restoration of salmon to the Umatilla River after 70 years of extirpation is a great example of how we can work with our federal and state partners to get these resources protected. And I think if the agencies were able to reach out more to their staff and make them aware that this forum is available to speak to tribes, it might demystify some of the tribal consultation concerns that people might have for picking up the phone. If the agencies, the state and federal agencies, weren't willing to consult with the tribes or contact us and work directly with us, successful projects like that wouldn't be possible.
I have talked to a lot of state agencies over the years about tribal consultation, and a couple things come to mind. One is communications, having good communications with each other, and that means not just occasional communications, but having regular communications with each other. People change in agencies and move on to different places. And for tribes, we tend to be the same folks over the years. And so it's trying to also make sure there's that continuity as people leave in state agencies, that there's materials or information or background about how they consult with tribes. Another piece is what does consultation really mean? So there's a couple pieces to that. One, and you probably have heard and others about small C and big C consultation. Small C consultation being talking with our staffs and getting to know them and having a dialogue with them. And then big C consultation meaning government consultation, and that's where the top state officials will meet directly with our tribal council. And so that's for government relationships. That's when you're meeting with big C consultation, you're meeting with our tribal council. You're not meeting with me or meeting with staff. That's the small C consultation. So it's something to remind folks of, and what does that mean? We've had over the years new people come in and say, well, we consulted with the tribes, and so we checked that box. Well, don't just check the box. Have a dialogue and make sure you're having these type of conversations with the tribe. The one thing that comes to my mind about probably good communications with state agencies, and not only just state agencies, but all stakeholders, are collaborations. For Warm Springs over the years, we've had what we call a good neighbor policy. And what that policy is one of, we're always going to be here forever, the tribes, and so are our neighbors. So we need to be talking with each other, we need to be getting along, and working with each other as best we can. We may not always agree, but at least we still have a dialogue and talking. And so that has been something important, I think, for all of us, is that we're all neighbors and we need to be talking with each other.
We can start with sovereignty, which is a powerful word, and one that sometimes is hard to understand, and we have to go back to, I think, where and how we started as a tribe. We are a treaty tribe with the federal government, so we have a treaty that was negotiated in 1855, and in that treaty there's specific rights that we reserved, and one of those was the right to fish and collect our first foods in our usual and accustomed areas. And in there, there's also language that establishes the right to govern yourself. The treaty also allows for us to manage our landscape, but it also allows us a right to sit down with the state and co-manage lands and resources that are defined in our usual and accustomed and ceded areas. The ceded area for us is 10 million acres that we sat down and identified as lands that we were occupying in 1855 and said we will cede those to the United States government, but we will retain the rights for our usual and accustomed purposes of those lands. A lot of Oregonians and a lot of folks not affiliated or aware of what tribes' rights are get a little upset over the fact that tribes are out, exercising their rights beyond the boundary, but we're utilizing the rights that were negotiated in the 1855 treaty for us to utilize those lands. Along those same lines, we co-manage them with the state. So we sit down with the state when there's a project that's coming into our ceded lands and identify the areas that are going to be affected, and we help identify what are some of the mitigation measures, some of the things that we can do to offset that impact. The tribes, for example, have a certification through the federal government for issuing water quality standards in waters on and bordering the reservation. And the Deschutes River is on the reservation, so the tribes and the state jointly have the responsibility to put measures into place to ensure that the water quality standards are not being significantly impacted by the use of the resource for in this example, the Pelton project. So the operator, which is the tribe, and Portland General have standards that they have to follow. As a sovereign nation, we were granted that right to be treated as a entity that can impose those conditions, just like the state.
In the early 90s, our people started feeling that pressure, and they wanted to, how do we deal with this? So tribal sovereignty. And it kept coming back to an explanation like what Webster says, what sovereignty is, law of the land. When our people questioned it, what does that really mean to Warm Springs, to our people here in Simnasho? It got to the point where the elders, they came to this building here, in this room here, came up with the Declaration of Sovereignty, which our people signed in 1992. And it's to remind all of us the importance. And as we talk of within our boundaries, to remind those around us that we have a say on what's happening outside in our ceded area. This is what I would hope would be shared for information's sake, that they read it, and it's very well written. And it says, though briefly though, this may not cover everything, but it's an attempt to share. And education is very important as we deal with the state, that they begin to understand. To me, true consultation is when you come to our door. You don't make us track you down. You come to our door You come through our door, you sit down with us. And we come in a way that where you're not last minute, where you want something from me that needs to be approved today because you want to do it tomorrow. Consultation is goes back to even how our people thought about the treaty. When they sat there for days talking about it, 3 days just discussing what are we really going to do, what does it mean to us. So consultation should happen the same way.
I have in my travels have talked about sovereignty. My cousin, Delbert Frank, and the rest of council decided to develop, along with Charles Wilkinson, develop the Declaration of Sovereignty, our view. They said that we have to repeat ourselves when we're asked that question. So we put it in a documented form so people can read that. Then if there's anything particular, they ask that question. But through that document, they'd know who we are. And basically, it is just respect, recognition of that. So whatever is being recorded here, I hopefully that my younger people are listening. And I'm hoping that state people, federal people who are non-native understand this is our position. It doesn't matter what tribe you're talking to, but this is our position as to who we are, have been, and will continue to be. And we'll carry on our teachings long after we're gone.